The chains rattled against the cold metallic floor. As Elias Thorne was shoved to his knees, the impact sending a jolt of pain up his shins. But he didn't flinch. He didn't look down. Instead, he tilted his head back, shaking the hair from his eyes and locking his gaze on the woman towering over him. If you could call her a woman, she was 7 feet of emerald-skinned perfection muscle, coiled beneath a uniform that looked like it was grown rather than sewn, shimmering with a bioluminescent pulse that matched the beating of her heart. Her eyes were pools of liquid gold vertical slits for pupils that narrowed as she inspected him like a piece of meat at a market stall. "You are smaller than the data suggests," the commander said. Her voice a low thrum that vibrated in Elias's chest. She circled him, her boots making no sound on the deck plating fragile, soft skin. "No natural armor, tell me, human. Why should I not space you right now and save my ship the oxygen?" Elias smirked a crooked expression that had gotten him into and out of trouble across a dozen systems. "Well, Commander," he drawled, letting his eyes travel up her long, powerful legs strictly purely for scientific reasons. "I've been told I'm quite durable. Where it counts. And as for oxygen, I'm happy to share yours if you get close enough." A heavy silence fell over the detention block. The 2 guards flanking the commander shifted their weapons, looking nervous. But the commander didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned down, her face inches from his. He could smell her scent. It was like crushed mint and ozone, sharp and electric interesting. She whispered, her golden eyes searching his face. "You display arrogance despite your helpless position. Perhaps you are not as useless as the council claims. Get him up. Prepare him for decontamination. If he carries so much as a single microbe of filth, I want him incinerated." Elias was hauled to his feet, the magnetic cuffs biting into his wrists as he was dragged down the pristine white corridors of the Viridian star station. He had come here on a tip, a very expensive tip, from a drunk navigator on Neptune, who claimed the women of the Viridia system were looking for mates. He had expected a paradise of eager alien beauties. Instead, he had been shot down, captured, and treated like a plague rat. But Elias Thorne was nothing if not adaptable. He watched the alien crew as they passed tall, elegant plant-based life forms who looked at him with a mixture of horror and fascination. He winked at a passing technician who dropped her datapad in shock, causing a ripple of emerald to flush across her cheeks. "Well, at least the charm still works," Elias muttered to himself as the guards shoved him into a sterile white room. The decontamination process was thorough and humiliating, involving sonic showers and a series of sprays that smelled like chemical fertilizer by the time he was dressed in a simple white tunic that felt like woven spider silk. He was itching to get back into his own clothes. The door hissed open, and the commander returned this time, accompanied by a smaller Viridian wearing the robes of a scientist. The scientist adjusted her spectacles, looking at Elias with wide, unblinking eyes, fascinated, absolutely fascinating look at the density of the muscle fibers. Despite the primitive skeletal structure, the scientist murmured, circling Elias and prodding him with a long, cold instrument. Commander Vespera crossed her arms, her biceps bulging against the fabric of her uniform. "Is he clean?" "Hi, Scholar Zyra." "He is sterile, Commander, though his testosterone levels are alarmingly high. It is a wonder he is not constantly aggressive." "Oh, I can be aggressive," Elias interjected, flashing his teeth in a wolfish grin. "It just depends on the motivation." "Strictly, purely, motivation." Vespera stepped into his personal space again, her height forcing him to crane his neck up. "Motivation," she echoed. "Is that what you call it? When your species invades sovereign space looking for breeding rights?" Elias laughed a dry sound. "Tell me, Commander, If I was invading, wouldn't I have brought a fleet instead of a single shuttle filled with fine wine and silk sheets? I came to trade, to explore, to maybe bridge the gap between our people. Bridge the gap. Vespera scoffed. You came to pollute our bloodline with your chaotic DNA. Humans are known for their instability, their violence, their short lifespans. You are a mayfly trying to mate with a sequoia. Elias shrugged. Maybe. But you know what they say about mayflies, we know how to make every second count. Zira, the scientist, let out a small gasp, hiding a smile behind her hand. Silence, Vespera snapped, though her golden eyes lingered on Elias's lips. For a fraction of a second too long, take him to the holding facility until the council decides his fate. He is to be studied, not entertained, and human. If you try to escape, I will break those fragile legs of yours myself. Elias watched her leave, admiring the view. I look forward to it. Commander, he called out before the door slid shut, cutting off his view of the most terrifyingly beautiful woman he had ever met. The holding facility was essentially a high-tech zoo. The walls were transparent, heavily shielded glass, looking out into a lush botanical garden that seemed to be the heart of the station. Elias paced the small room, testing the boundaries. The glass was unbreakable. The door was bio-locked. He was trapped, but he wasn't worried. Yet he had been in worse spots over the next few days. He became a spectacle. Viridians would walk past the glass, peering in at the human. Curiosity seemed to be winning over disgust. Zira, the scientist, visited daily running cognitive tests and asking endless questions about Earth. Tell me, Elias, she asked on the third day, her voice piped in through the intercom. Is it true that humans pair for life? Or is that a myth? Strictly purely depends on the human. Elias replied, doing push-ups on the floor, knowing exactly how the physical exertion made his muscles bunch and flex for some. It's for life for others. It's for the night. Why Zira looking for a volunteer? Zira's skin flushed that deep green again. No, I simply studying the sociological implications. Your species is so chaotic, yet you have created art, music, philosophy. It is a contradiction. Elias stopped mid-push-up and sat up, wiping sweat from his brow. Chaos breeds creation. Zira, if everything is perfect and orderly like this station, nothing new ever grows. You need a little dirt to make a flower bloom. Isn't that right? As the days turned into a week, Elias noticed a shift. The guards were less rough. The passers-by lingered longer, pointing and whispering with smiles instead of sneers. He was winning them over one push-up and charming quip at a time, but the one person he hadn't seen since his intake was Commander Vespera, and that bothered him more than the imprisonment he needed to see her to crack that stone-cold exterior, because he knew beneath that icy military discipline was a fire waiting to be stoked. His chance came unexpectedly. The station's artificial day cycle had just dimmed to a twilight glow when the alarms began to blare. Not the sharp siren of an escape, but a low, throbbing hum that vibrated. The floor lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red strobes. Elias moved to the glass, peering out into the garden. The plants, usually vibrant and glowing, were dimming, wilting before his eyes. The air in his cell grew stale, the ventilation fans shuddering to a halt. The door to his cell clicked and hissed, sliding open manually. A young guard stumbled in, clutching her throat, her skin turning a sickly gray color. Help. She wheezed, the atmospheric scrubbers, they've failed. Elias didn't hesitate. He caught the guard before she fell, easing her to the ground. Where is the engineering deck? He demanded, his voice sharp with command authority. The guard pointed weakly down the hall level, 4 main reactor manual. Override. Elias took off, running his bare feet, slapping against the cold metal deck. He found chaos in the corridors. Viridians were collapsing their plant-based physiology, making them incredibly susceptible to the drop in air quality and the loss of the artificial sunlight. The carbon dioxide levels were rising fast, giving Elias a headache, but his human lungs were built for endurance, built to survive in the smog of Earth's industrial cities. He pushed past gasping scientists and fallen guards, sprinting for the lift, asking it to override. The lift was dead. He pried the doors open and looked down the shaft, sliding down the emergency cables, burning his palms. But ignoring the pain, he landed on level 4 with a heavy thud and rolled to his feet. The engineering deck was a nightmare of steam and sparking conduits. Inside the main control room, he found Commander Vespera. She was on her knees, fighting to stay conscious, her hands flying over a holographic interface that was blinking red errors. She looked up as Elias burst in her eyes, hazy human. She rasped, "Get back to your cell, you will die here." "Not today," Elias growled, moving to her side. "What's the problem?" Vespera coughed, her body shuddering violently. "The biocore, it's destabilizing a viral pathogen in the nutrient feed. It's choking the station. We need to flush the system, but the manual valves are jammed." Vespera tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Elias caught her, pulling her against his chest. She felt feverishly hot, her bioluminescence flickering like a dying candle. "Stay with me, Vespera, tell me which valve." She pointed a shaking hand toward a massive sealed bulkhead at the far end of the room. "The primary intake. It requires the strength of 3 Viridians to turn manually without hydraulics." "I cannot do it." Elias looked at the valve. It was a massive wheel of solid steel, rusted shut by the corrosive nutrient leak. "I got this," he said, depositing her gently against the console. "Guide me through the purge sequence." Vespera grabbed his wrist, her grip weak. "You will burn your hands. The steam is toxic. Just do it!" Elias yelled, running toward the bulkhead. The heat near the valve was intense, searing his skin. The air was thick with chemical fumes. Elias grabbed the wheel, his muscles screaming in protest. He grit his teeth, planting his feet, and pulled nothing. "It wouldn't budge. Come on, you piece of junk!" he roared, channeling every ounce of strength in his body. He thought of the way Vespera had looked at him, the challenge in her eyes. He wasn't going to let her die. Not like this, with a primal scream that echoed through the chamber. He heaved, the metal groaned, and then with a screech of tearing steel, it turned an inch, then 2. Steam blasted him in the face, scalding his cheek. But he didn't let go. He spun the wheel faster and faster until a loud clank signaled it was fully open. "Purge! It now!" Elias shouted, collapsing to his knees. Vespera slammed her hand onto the console. A massive whoosh of air depressurized the room, venting the toxic gas and flooding the system with fresh nutrient solution. The lights flickered and stabilized, turning from angry red to a soothing blue cool. Fresh air rushed into the room. Elias lay on the floor, panting, his chest heaving, his hands blistered and raw. He heard footsteps and looked up to see Vespera standing over him. She looked exhausted but alive, her color returning, her glow steadying. "Why?" she asked softly, looking down at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Why?" "Save us. You are a prisoner. We treated you like an animal." Elias managed a weak smile, sitting up and leaning against the bulkhead. "Well, Commander," he said, looking at his ruined hands, "I told you I was durable. Besides, it would be a shame to let such a beautiful galaxy go dark." Vespera stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand, turning it over to inspect the burns. Gentle, surprisingly gentle for a warrior. She tore a strip of fabric from her own uniform and wrapped his hand, careful not to touch the raw skin. "Come, human," she said, her voice losing its hard edge. "Let us get you to the infirmary before you die of infection and make me look incompetent." The news of Elias's heroism spread through the station faster than the virus had. The Beast of Earth had saved the station single-handedly when he was released from the infirmary 3 days later, his hands bandaged, but healing. He found he wasn't returned to his cell. Instead, he was given quarters in the guest wing, a luxurious suite overlooking the nebula. High Scholar. Zyra was there to greet him, practically bouncing with excitement. Elias, you are the talk of the council, your physiology, your resistance to the toxins, your strength. It is unprecedented. The council wishes to hold a reception in your honor. Tonight, a reception? Elias raised an eyebrow. Does this mean I get my clothes back? Zyra giggled, handing him a package freshly cleaned and pressed. Where? Them well. Elias, tonight you are not a prisoner. You are a savior. The reception was a dazzling display of wealth and power held in the station's grand observation dome. Dignitaries from the Viridian homeworld had arrived eager to see the human hero. Elias walked into the room wearing his tailored black suit, the one he had arrived in. He felt the eyes of every female in the room on him, but this time, there was no disgust. There was hunger. He moved through the crowd accepting thanks and handshakes, charming the matriarchs with stories of earth flattery flowing from his lips like wine, but his eyes were scanning the room for only one person. He found her standing by the Mesra's viewport looking out at the stars. Vespera, she wasn't wearing her uniform tonight. Instead, she wore a gown of shimmering, living fabric that clung to her curves like a second skin, leaving her powerful shoulders and back exposed. She looked regal, dangerous, and breathtakingly beautiful. Commander Elias said, stepping up beside her, "You clean up nice, Vespera," turned her golden eyes sweeping over him in his suit. "You look civilized." Thorne? She admitted almost reluctantly for a chaotic species. Elias leaned against the railing facing her. "Don't let the suit fool you, I'm still wild at heart." Vespera took a step closer, the tension between them crackling in the air. "Why did you do it? Elias, why risk your life for a jailer?" Elias dropped the playful act, his voice lowering. "Because I saw something in you, Vespera. From the moment you put me in chains, I saw a fire that matched mine, and I wasn't about to let that fire go out." Vespera's breath hitched. She looked around to ensure they were not being overheard, then leaned in close, her lips inches from his ear. "Be careful, human," she whispered on Viridia. "We have a saying, do not touch the sun unless you are prepared to burn." Elias turned his head so their noses brushed. "I've never been afraid of a little heat." Before the moment could deepen, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. The High Counselor had arrived, a towering ancient Viridian with skin like old bark leaning on a staff. She made a beeline for Elias, the room parting for her Master Thorne. The High Counselor rasped her voice like dry leaves rustling. "We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. Your actions have proven that perhaps we have judged your species too harshly. We offer you freedom. You may leave on the next transport with full compensation." Elias looked at the counselor, then back at Vespera, whose face had gone carefully blank. He looked at the gathered crowd. The scientists, the guards, the people he had saved freedom. It was what he wanted, right, to get back to his ship to find the next adventure. But as he looked at Vespera, he realized the adventure was right here. High Counselor Elias said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "I appreciate the offer, truly, but I find myself fascinated by your culture. I believe there is much more we can learn from each other if you'll have me. I'd like to stay as a cultural liaison to help strengthen the bond between our worlds." A ripple of shock went through the room, followed by excited murmurs. Vespera's eyes widened, a flicker of something like hope crossing her features. The High Counselor smiled, a slow, cracking shifting of bark. Very well. Master Thorne, you may remain under the supervision of Commander Vespera, of course. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Elias was no longer a prisoner, but he was still a curiosity. He spent his days in the labs with Zyra, helping them understand human biology and engineering, and his evenings. His evenings were becoming a complicated game of cat and mouse with Vespera. They sparred in the training rings, Elias teaching her earth boxing techniques, while she taught him how to fight with a dual-blade staff. The physical contact, the sweat, the grappling. It only fueled the fire between them. Other Viridian females made their interest known, leaving gifts at his door, inviting him to private dinners. But Elias turned them all down, politely. His focus was singular. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Elias and Vespera sat on the mats, catching their breath. The training room was dim, lit only by the starlight from the viewport. "Tell me," Vespera asked, wiping sweat from her neck, "why do you reject the others? There are females of high standing who desire you, wealthy, influential, yet you ignore them. Strictly, purely matter of taste," Elias said, leaning back on his hands. "I'm not looking for status, Vespera. I'm looking for an equal, someone who challenges me, someone who can take me down and pick me back up." Vespera looked at him, her expression intense. "And you think I am this equal?" Elias met her gaze, holding it. "I know you are." Vespera stood up, slowly extending a hand to him. "Stand up, human, show me this passion you speak of." Elias took her hand and she pulled him up, but she didn't let go. She pulled him into her chest, her other hand tangling in his hair. She kissed him, then hard and demanding. It wasn't a tentative first kiss, it was a collision, a declaration of war and surrender. All at once her skin felt cool against his, but her mouth was hot-tasting of that electric ozone mint. Elias groaned, wrapping his arms around her waist, lifting her. Slightly off the ground, Vespera wrapped her legs around him, pinning him against the wall of the training room. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, desperate for weeks of pent-up tension finally breaking the dam. They didn't make it back to his quarters. They found a secluded alcove in the officers' mess, which was thankfully empty. The night was a blur of sensation. Elias discovered that for all their differences, humans and Viridians fit together perfectly. Vespera was strong, demanding, vocal in a way that drove him wild, and he in turn showed her that human endurance wasn't just a myth when they finally lay tangled together on the floor of his suite. Later that night, exhausted and sated, Vespera traced the line of his jaw with a sharp fingernail. "You are dangerous, Elias Thorne," she murmured, resting her head on his chest. "You have compromised my defenses completely." Elias kissed the top of her head. "Consider it a mutual surrender, Commander. But peace is a fragile thing in the void." Their newfound happiness was shattered 2 weeks later. Not by a virus, but by a fleet. The sensors picked them up at the edge of the system. Void Raiders scavengers who preyed on isolated stations for resources and slaves. The klaxons blared, calling Vespera to the bridge. Elias was right beside her, ignoring the confused looks of the bridge crew report. Vespera barked, sliding into her command chair. 6 frigates. Commander, heavy weapon signatures, they are hailing us. Put it on screen. The face of the raider captain appeared, a scarred, grotesque cyborg demanding surrender, strictly, purely unconditional surrender, or we turn your station into scrap metal. Vespera's jaw tightened. "We have no heavy cruisers, only patrol ships. We cannot win a direct firefight." Elias studied the tactical map, his mind racing, looking for an angle. "Vespera," he said, pointing at the display. "The nebula you're orbiting, it's high in ionic interference, right? Yes, it scrambles long-range sensors. That is why we built the station here to hide." Elias grinned, a dark, predatory look returning to his face. If they can't see us, they can't hit us. Kill the station's power. Everything barely keep life support running. Go dark. Totally dark. Vespera looked at him. Are you mad? They will board us. That's the plan, Elias said. Let them come in close thinking we're dead in the water when they enter the gravity. Well of the station. We overload the main deflector dish not as a shield but as a pulse cannon. A directed ionic burst. It'll fry their systems, leaving them drifting dead. Then we pick them off. Vespera looked at the screen, then at Elias. It is a gamble. If the pulse fails, we are defenseless. Trust me, Elias said. Softy trust. The chaos. Vespera nodded sharply. Do it, kill all power. The station plunged into darkness. Silence fell heavy and oppressive. The only light came from the swirling purple clouds of the nebula outside, on the tactical screen. They watched the red dots of the raider ships moving in like sharks, smelling blood. Closer, closer hold. Elias whispered his hand. Resting on Vespera's shoulder on the armrest, she was rigid, trembling with the effort of restraint. Wait for it. Wait for it. Now Vespera shouted. Engage! The engineering team slammed the overrides. The station shuddered violently as the main deflector dish powered up in a microsecond, discharging a massive invisible wave of ionic energy. The effect was instant. The lights on the raider ships died. Their engines flared and cut out. They drifted listlessly caught in the station's gravity, powerless weapons, free. Vespera commanded fire at will. The station's point defense turrets roared to life, tearing into the disabled raider ships. It was a slaughter within minutes. The raider fleet was reduced to burning debris, drifting into the nebula. The bridge crew erupted in cheers, hugging each other, slapping consoles. Vespera sat back in her chair, exhaling a long breath. She looked up at Elias standing beside her, looking like a god of war in the emergency lighting. You were right, she said, a smile breaking through her stoic mask. Chaos has its uses. Elias took her hand. Kissing the knuckles, strictly, purely tactical genius, Commander. Strictly, purely. The victory over the Raiders cemented Elias's place on Viridia. He wasn't just a liaison anymore. He was a hero, a strategist, a partner. Weeks turned into months. The Council officially recognized humans as a friendly species, opening trade negotiations. Elias stood on the observation deck watching the first human diplomatic ship dock, huge and clunky compared to the elegant Viridian vessels, but beautiful. Nonetheless, he felt a hand on his arm and turned to see Vespera. She was wearing a ceremonial robe, white and gold, looking radiant. Elias, she said, her voice serious, the Council has offered you a position, High Admiral of the Fleet. You would lead our defense forces, unite our tactics with yours. It is a lifetime appointment. Elias looked at the ship. His ticket home, if he wanted it. Then he looked at Vespera, at the life they had built, the training sessions, the quiet mornings, the fiery nights. He looked at the ring he had secretly commissioned, made of Viridian crystal and earth steel. I'll take the job, Elias said, turning to face her fully on one condition. Vespera raised an eyebrow, always bargaining human. What is it? Elias dropped to one knee, pulling the ring from his pocket. The bridge went silent, the crew watching with bated breath. That you take a permanent assignment as my co-pilot, strictly, purely for life. Vespera stared at the ring, her golden eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She laughed a sound of pure joy that he had never heard before. Stand up, you fool. Elias stood, and she threw her arms around him, kissing him as the crew cheered. Yes, she whispered against his lips, strictly, purely yes. And so, Elias Thorne, the bachelor who came looking for a fling, found a destiny. He became the first human High Admiral of the Viridian fleet, proving that sometimes the best things in the universe are the ones you have to fight for, the ones that challenge. You, the ones that scare you a little. He never did go back to Earth. Why would he when he had the stars and the woman who shone brighter than all of them right here? That's the story of how a human charmed his way into the heart of a hostile galaxy. What did you think of Elias's tactics? Would you have risked the ionic pulse? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey across the stars, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and check out the link in the description for more sci-fi adventures waiting just for you. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and never be afraid to embrace a little chaos.